Welcome to our first session in our Classroom Resources Grant Series. Today we are going to take a deep dive into engagement. My name is Amy Cavalier, and I'm joined by my colleague, Elaine Neugebauer. We are both educational consultants from the Patton-Pittsburgh office. And I'm also joined today by colleagues from across all three Patton offices for today's session. Couple notes, today's session is going to be recorded, and the link to that recording, as well as a copy of the presentation and the slides, will be available on our Padlet, and we'll talk about that shortly. Questions can arise throughout today's session. You're welcome to enter those into the chat as they arise, and we will get to those as we are able.
Okay, hold on, let me text.
Okay, good morning, everyone. All right, so if one of my colleagues would want to start our recording, that would be fantastic.
It is good to go, Amy.
All right, thank you. A couple notes as we begin. Patton's mission is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local LEAs to serve students who receive special education services. And we always talk about PDE's commitment to the least restrictive environment. On the screen there. Our goal for each child is to ensure IEP teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. Now, we just want to talk about some quick Zoom controls in case you're not familiar. So as a reminder, in order for others to hear you during today's meeting, you'll need to unmute. And so you can look on your screen and find that little microphone that will allow you to unmute. It's right here. You also have the ability to turn your video on or off. And so you can find the little video screen there. So if you're comfortable, we'd ask that you keep your video on today because we want to be engaged and we'd like to ask everyone to be present. So again, you can just click your video on here or off as you need. We will also be asking you to use the chat. And if you're not familiar, please find where you can click on the chat. You'll see that a window will open on your screen and you'll have the ability to chat with everyone. And that is for responses so that we can all see and be engaged with the presentation. We'll also be loading some information into the chat, resources and links, because one of our goals today is to share resources. So hopefully you're able to find the chat on your screen. Additionally, we will be using breakout rooms as a means for engagement and discussion. So when you're ready to go to a breakout room, you can click join and you'll see a screen that indicates that you are in the breakout room. And again, feel free to have your camera on. And then at the end of the breakout room, you'll get a little reminder that the room will close. So if you're not done, feel free to continue. If you are, you can click return to the main session. And then you'll see the returning to main session icon. So that's just a little overview about our Zoom controls today. We will be using breakout rooms. Sometimes it'll be a breakout room with people from other teams across the state. And sometimes we want to give you an opportunity to meet with your team. And so what we'd like to ask you to do now is to rename yourself using the number that corresponds with your school team. And you can see those on the screen. So we would ask that you just click on the 3 dots in your video square and then click rename. And you can just use your first name, but use the number that corresponds with your school team. If you are a Patton or IU colleague, please place that number, the number that you'd like us to use to put you with your teams in front of your name as well, because that's how we get people together. So as a reminder, just go ahead, we'll take a minute or two or a couple moments to rename. Again, for example, if I was renaming and I was with Connellsville Area School District, I would put a number 1 and I would put Amy. So just take another moment to give folks some time to do.
There. Does anybody know?
All right. So your number should be at the beginning of your name, and that will help our breakout rooms get created. So thank you for that. All right. In order to change your name, if you click on your video box where you see your face, you'll see 3 dots that come up. And when you click the 3 dots, there's a choice that says rename. Hopefully everyone has that option. Thank you for that question, Emily. All right. All right, we're gonna continue on here. So today we want to do take a look at our learning intentions. Here's what we hope to accomplish today. We've designed this session so that we can help anyone who's new to UDL, as well as people who are continuing on their UDL journey, learn and discover new resources. So we hope that today you're able to understand the UDL, or I'm sorry, explain the UDL framework, explain those 3 components, and then also identify strategies and resources to support your work. So again, we'll be sharing things as we go through, but all of the things that we're sharing will be found on this Padlet. And one of my colleagues will place the Padlet link in the chat for you. This Padlet, as soon as you get the link there, you can feel free to head over to the Padlet. You'll see we have different columns on there for each of the sessions. So as we go through the Padlet, or I'm sorry, as we go through the sessions, we will be adding resources during each session. And they'll be available for you indefinitely. So all of the resources, you don't have to worry about saving them. We'll continue to populate the Padlet. Additionally, a link to today's session recording will be on the Padlet. Today's slides will be on the Padlet. So the Padlet is a place where you can go to find all of the things that we're going to share. And we're hoping that it's a really valuable resource for you as you're going through your UDL journey. So the first thing we want to do as we kick off here is we want you to go out to the Padlet. And as you go out to the Padlet, you'll find some opportunities. It's called the Opportunity Myth. And what we did was we uploaded 2 options. One is you can read the Opportunity Myth, and 2, you can listen to the Thank you. So when you go to the Padlet, you can see in the first column, the 2 blue backgrounds here are the Opportunity Myth. And what we'd like you to do, again, is go out to the Padlet, look at the Opportunity Myth, read it or listen to it. And then think about this as you're doing that. When we come back, we would like you to be ready to share a connection, a quote, or a thought that resonates with you after you've read or listened to the opportunity. We had some good discussion and the opportunity to talk with our colleagues from around the state about the Opportunity Myth. Does it look like everyone's? Yes. Okay, great. All right. And as we go on, just as a little housekeeping, Jeff has put in the chat the numbers. We hope you can rename so that for our next opportunity for breakouts, you can be with your school team. So check out the chat for that. All right, so as we get going here, what is universal design for learning? We're going to dive into that. And as we go through the next couple slides, we'll be doing another chat alert. And what I'd like to ask you to do while we're going through this is to think about why Universal Design for Learning is a framework and why thinking about it as a framework is so important. Some people talk about UDL as if it's a list of strategies. They want a checklist. They want to check it off and they say, yep, we do this, we do this, we do this. And that's not really what Universal Design for Learning is. It's not a checklist. It's something much, much bigger than that. And it's a framework. And that's what we want you to think about as we kind of go through the content this morning. You know, again, we want to think about why is this a framework and not a strategy list. So here is a breakdown. A framework is a set of beliefs. It's a set of values. And so we're going to talk about what a UDL practitioner believes before we talk about what a UDL practitioner does, because this work is about mindset. It's about beliefs. It's about advocating for a better system for all students, not just those who arrive without facing any barriers. So you can see here the 3 core beliefs of UDL. And again, we're not going to talk about strategies right at this moment. We're just going to talk about beliefs. So the first one is variability. Variability is the rule. It's not the exception. UDL practitioners believe that students do not have to do the same things at the same time. All students are working toward the same firm goals and grade level standards, but all students will become expert learners if barriers are removed. So let's unpack each one of these. And again, talk about and think about why a framework is so important and why a framework can be tricky for people to embrace. So when we talk about the framework, it's important to talk about and understand what variability is. Traditional education loved to put labels on students as if those labels meant something for learning, which they do not. So people might say, you know, what does UDL look like for students with disabilities? You can't possibly look at every student as if they were the same. And so you can't say, well, oh, this strategy is really going to work for every student who has an IEP, because again, the label doesn't tell us anything about student interest or student cognitive skills, because within every single child, there's this complex combination of all of that. And those things are changing all the time. So even when you think you might have nailed down, you know, a kid, you could be wrong because something could change. There's a lot of variability, and the variability is always based on context. So here's an example. I'm a very strong reader. I know how to decode. I wear glasses so that I can see the text, and I have really strong comprehension skills. So in theory, I should be reading paper text. I'd be a good candidate for that. Except if I have a migraine. I can't take in things visually when I have that. So when you think about variability, you know, we make a lot of assumptions about kids. Oh, that kid's going to need audio. But we have to recognize that based on context, there are a lot of kids whose needs and challenges are such that we can't even anticipate those. So the UDL practitioner has to recognize that variability is the most widely validated finding in educational research, and it's something we can plan for. We can plan for variability. So if you are a UDL practitioner, you realize that there is no way that all the kids will be doing the same things at the same time in the same way. That is variability. The next thing we want to talk about here is high expectations. You know, all students deserve high expectations. They deserve engaging curriculum and grade level rigor. And I'm sure that you had some thoughts about that when you looked at the opportunity myth. And as a UDL practitioner, you're not going to be thinking about how do I make this easier? You're going to be thinking about how do I scaffold this for these students so that they can get to that goal, that grade level standard. And then we have the third principle. The most critical skill that our kids can have is learning how to learn. Following our directions and doing what they are told is kind of becoming archaic because compliance can be done with robots. We need our kids to be able to learn how to make decisions. If I need to complete this task, these are the scaffolds I need to have in place. When we make decisions for students, we're preventing them from building those skills that are necessary to make decisions for themselves. And when they have those skills to make decisions for themselves, that is called expert learning. And that's the third piece in the UDL framework. So when you have a UDL framework, you have a school and a system that says we embrace variability. We know that students are going to need different things at different times. And we want to make sure that all students have access to high expectations and grade level rigor. And we are going to put kids in charge of their learning. And we will allow them to begin to make decisions about themselves. So that is just a quick overview of the UDL framework and what a practitioner of UDL believes. So we're going to take a look here at this quick little video. And in this video, again, I want you to think about why understanding UDL as a framework is so important. It's not just a collection of strategies, but it is a framework. So say this.
An Educator's Guide to Universal Design for Learning, UDL. UDL is an approach to teaching and learning that gives every student an equal opportunity to succeed. UDL is considered best practice for teaching all students in an inclusive learning environment. The goal of UDL is to create expert learners who are purposeful, motivated, resourceful, knowledgeable, and strategic. Teachers consider learner variability when designing lessons because there is no such thing as an average student. Teachers use various teaching methods that build in flexibility to remove any barriers to learning. UDL is a framework on designing lessons, starting with the development of clear, rigorous goals and assessments. UDL is based on three main principles. Principle 1, engagement. A teacher looks for multiple ways to motivate learners and sustain their interest. Examples: offer choices such as choice boards or playlists, connect the content and concepts to the students' lives, gamification, create opportunities to explore and experiment, have students participate in the design of assignments and assessments. Principle 2, representation. A teacher offers multiple ways of representing the content, concepts, and/or skills to be learned. For example, the instructor could provide a passage of text along with an audio recording of the content and task directions, a video showing how to determine key information in the source, providing the text in a digital format that can be read using a text-to-speech application, pre-teaching vocabulary, providing graphic organizers. Principle 3, action and expression. A teacher offers learners multiple ways to demonstrate their understanding. For example, learners could be given the following choices: taking a traditional pencil and paper test, creating and performing a song, making a video or a comic strip, doing a group project involving the creative arts, using physical manipulatives. UDL helps all learners because UDL sees barriers in the learning environment, not in the learner. UDL makes learning more accessible in all classrooms. UDL presents information in ways that consider the student's learning profile. UDL builds in flexibility for learners to use their strengths to work on their areas of growth, and UDL reduces stigma. By giving a variety of options to everyone, UDL doesn't single out any learners.
All right, so hopefully that kind of helped to give you some more ideas around thinking about UDL as a framework, like I said.
Here's an analogy that can help teachers better.
And it's important, they did list some strategies there, but it is important to recognize and think about UDL is a collection, it is not a collection of strategies, it's a framework. So what I'd like to do now is, hopefully you've had some time to think about this. And if you have any thoughts about this, I would invite you to enter those into the chat and we'll take a look at those. So why is UDL as a framework important to understand? So if you have ideas, you could enter those into the chat now. Just take a look there. Okay, yeah, Maureen says you need all three pathways. Yes, Sharon, seeing barriers in the environment, not within the student. Yes, agree. Oh, wow, thank you very much. Lots of ideas in there. Yes, looking at LRE for all students. Yeah, that's a great thing. Great. Hopefully you're checking these out. I'm trying to look through here. It allows teachers to focus on the individual needs of their students and allows for flexibility. Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm just looking. It's a mindset. Yes, it's a way of thinking that drives what we're doing in our classrooms. Yes, very good. Thank you very much. Excellent. Lots of great comments here. Trying to get to them all. Yeah, it forces us as educators to re-examine our system to allow implementation of the framework. And that's, I think, one of the challenges for people who are new to UDL. And so, yeah, just even acknowledging that is very important. Yeah, very good. Thank you so much for everyone. And if you have more thoughts, feel free to throw those into the chat so that everyone can take a look at those. But yes, thank you very much. Lots of great thoughts and ideas as we're getting into this. Oh yes, Alina, we'll be talking about that. UDL sounds similar to differentiated instruction. If we could just ask you to put that thought on pause, we will come to that very shortly, but that's a great point. Yeah, we'll talk about that. All right, thank you very much again for all those responses. So when we talk about UDL, the framework, we really like this slide because you can see here, there are several key pieces that really are a part of the framework. Standards, yes, the teacher has to know their standards very well. They have to understand what is it that every student needs to know and be able to do. Because again, we want to have those high, those rigorous goals, those grade level standards in place. And then the next thing we see there is student voice. You have to be willing to put students in the driver's seat, asking them which of these pathways are going to allow you to be successful with your learning. We want you to try them out. We want you to adjust. If we find that you're not doing, your learning isn't where we want it to be, then we will prompt you to make that adjustment. But again, that's how the student voice is linked to those expert learners. And then we have flexibility. And I think sometimes this can be challenging for teachers because teachers want to have a plan and flexibility isn't always easy. But standards and student voice and flexibility are the things that drive everything in UDL. And those are just some things to keep in mind. Now, CAST has a very fancy UDL Guidelines document. And you can check that out. I see Kim has put that link in the Padlet. It has a clickable web page that offers concrete strategies. So you can see some of these are listed on the slide. But remember, these are all contextual. Excuse me. It's seeing the framework as a mindset that's most valuable. So as we work through the different sessions that we have planned over the course of our year with the grant, we'll be exploring the different areas of engagement, which is the why of learning, representation, the what of learning, and the action and expression, which is the how of learning. So we're going to go back to the Padlet. Hopefully everyone was able to get into the Padlet. I know earlier people had some technical difficulties. But we want to give you some time to explore the guidelines and how to use them. And so what we're going to do in the next about maybe 10 minutes is we're going to give you some time to go into the Padlet. And you can see these are green videos, but the background is green. You can see that. And there are three choices. One is entitled engagement, and one is entitled UDL Guidelines Overview. And then the third one is how to read the UDL guidelines. And how to read the UDL guidelines is helpful if you're new to the guidelines document, or if you just want to take a deeper dive into the document. So we would like you to go ahead and take some time. Oh, thank you, Kim. We want to take some time to go into one of these different videos. So again, we want you to watch one of the videos, take a quick break. And then when we return, we're going to ask you to put one piece of new learning that you had in the chat. So hopefully, I see Kim has the Padlet link in the chat. So we're going to give you some time to go ahead and do that. And all right. So again, what we'd like you to do is watch one of these videos, one of the green videos on the Padlet, either engagement, UDL guidelines overview, or how to read the UDL guidelines. And then go ahead and put one piece of new learning that you had in the chat.
And Amy, I have 9:45, so we'll come back together at 9:55.
That sounds great, Jeff. Thank you. All right, so if you haven't had the opportunity, please go ahead and enter some new learning or some connections that you made when you had the opportunity to check out one of those resources. I'm seeing lots of great connections in the chat that people are making. So thank you for those. I also think we want to point out that we're trying to model some UDL here for you as well. So hopefully you're picking up on that. We're trying to give some opportunities for you to differentiate your pathway and how you're learning, you're controlling your learning this morning. So hopefully you're getting some ideas with what we're doing with the Padlet. But yes, lots and lots of great feedback in the chat. And so this is exciting. So at this time, we are going to switch gears and our presenters. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Elaine Neugebauer. Elaine's going to take over. And you can see she's all ready to go here with our slide entitled Frameworks Drive Design. So again, thank you for your participation in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Elaine.
Okay, so we're going to continue on with orienting ourselves to UDL, and it is a framework. So one question that we had in the chat, took on what are, like I work with differentiated instruction, and how does it differ from universal design for learning? So in this little grid we have here, we have universal design for learning and questions that drive the design. So we have the two designs. So looking at UDL, universal design for learning, here are some questions that drive the design. What is it that all learners need to know and to be able to do? Also, what barriers may prevent students from learning? And how do we design flexible pathways for learners to learn and share what they know? So thinking about just kind of some of the things that we covered earlier, this kind of just puts it into the design of universal design for learning. Below that, we have differentiated instruction. And looking at differentiated instruction being defined by these questions. How should students be flexibly grouped? And what experience is necessary for the group to be challenged and supported? So for those folks that feel pretty comfortable with, just utilizing this grid, or just reflecting on their own experience with universal design and differentiated instruction, I'd like to ask the question to be put into the chat. Give one difference between UDL and differentiated instruction. Just take a minute and pop your understanding into the chat. Okay, we have student choice, the students making that choice. Woo, going very quick. Student driven, very key piece to universal design. Proactive, a lot of student choice. UDL being a framework. Okay, looking at being proactive with the barriers in mind. Differentiated is reactive and works around barriers. A couple of good things are just like buzzing by, but just take a look at what some folks have put in. UDL helps remove barriers, proactive design versus reactive, really focused on student choices and removing barriers and being proactive. So we're going to, just continue this discussion. You'll also note that in UDL supports inclusive practices and student involvement in their own learning, which is just one of the goals. We want those expert learners out there. UDL proactively evaluates classroom instruction. And that's something, that we want as, instructors and teachers. Students' involvement in their own learning, great. What benefits one, benefits all. Just some really great input in here. Variability versus reactively responding to student variability. So being that the proactive piece. Okay, so continue to put some great things in here. We'll, definitely have the record of this. And then also folks can kind of continue to kind of view these as we go along. All right, thank you. And, just really great participation from the group here. All right. So we're going to take a look at UDL in real life. And for folks, just kind of new to the framework for UDL, we're just going to utilize an analogy. And analogies are really great strategies to use, with all learners. And it's giving students the opportunity to and learners an opportunity to kind of relate to a new concept through something they might already be familiar with. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with this, but we are going to, just take a look at a pool party dilemma. So you have your big pool. It's been probably quite a while since we have been in a pool with this weather. The goal, so we're stating our goal here. Everyone have an awesome time cooling off and getting refreshed on a sweltering day. So we had quite a few of those this summer. So this is how the party's going to go down here. The invite will be sent on TikTok. Everyone will be given a bikini or surf shorts in the same size. Everyone will play water volleyball, finish a double cheeseburger, and drink Mai Tais. Okay, so think about that. And I'd like folks to, if you would, just pop into the chat real quick. Will you be going to this pool party? We have a lot of no's, just where they kind of broke with the invitation. I don't have TikTok. Well, yeah, sure. I don't either. I'm holding off on it as much as my daughter wants me to join up. I might leave early. Okay, so we have a lot of no's and someone that's kind of like just really kind of contemplating it. You lost me at bikini. You're here. All right, so is this a universally designed event, invitation, aspects? Absolutely not. So there may be folks that are just kind of up, have TikTok, they're up for, hoping that, the size will fit them, really like water volleyball and just love cheeseburgers. But just in general, thinking about, getting a large crowd together and really going back to our goal, everyone have an awesome time cooling off, getting refreshed on a sweltering day. So just some of the aspects of the planning, the invitation aren't really meeting the needs of mostly everyone on this webinar. Okay, just a little bit of a problem advancing my slides. So here's just a nice illustration that's been provided for us. One size fits all, just kind of what the reality of the folks that are planning this event kind of thought would be, wouldn't be a barrier for the folks that have been invited. So we have, just a representation of, what might be something that would interest a very, small group of folks, just from our little poll. So just to kind of look at another scenario that kind of illustrates this point and kind of gives us a little reference to the differentiated instruction. And here's the scenario. You are having a dinner party with 20 guests. Some of them, their eating preferences, and some you really don't. You decide you're going to make a meat lasagna. That will, just cover all the folks. You're looking at the portions. Anyone see any problem with this? And, I forgot to tell you, one person attending has a dairy allergy. One of the cousins is a vegan. Some folks coming are not really big fans of Italian food, and one guest is gluten-free. So just really quickly in the chat, just give me an idea of if you see a problem with this planned event. And the goal would be just, to provide a nice dinner for friends. Okay, so we have lack of variability in the menu, need more options. Guests would go hungry. And remember, our objective goal is to have a nice dinner party with folks, which I would assume would include them eating. Food restrictions could have some serious medical issues. And not everyone can eat. Remember, it's, having a nice dinner party, dinner being part of that is our goal. So great responses. Also to kind of looking at, maybe some first ways to kind of accommodate folks. Well, we see that someone has a dairy allergy, so I'm going to make another lasagna that is going to have dairy-free, cheeses. And maybe we'll just throw in gluten-free noodles with that one. Not sure what we'll do about folks not liking Italian food, so maybe something that's a little less Italian lasagna, which I'm not really sure I know what that would be. And then maybe a vegan lasagna. Oh, and here we have a more universally designed comment. Build your own lasagna with various ingredients. And does that meet our goal? Will everyone have a nice meal? Yes, definitely. So we're kind of meeting the needs of a lot of folks, and we're kind of being proactive. We're looking at from the start that we're looking at providing variability, a lot of options, so that folks can have a nice and meet our goal of having a nice dinner with friends. Thanks, great participation there. So we're going to move along. Ooh, we had some, definitely looking at like a barrier, folks in our last scenario being able to swim. Okay, so kind of moving along, we kind of looked at, just with those scenarios, just starting for us to think about UDL in our lives. And we're going to kind of continue to start to look at that framework, and then also to some real life applications that it would occur within our instructional settings. So real quick illustration here, we have an illustration of the golden circle. And the golden circle was developed by Simon Sinek, and he presented it as at a TED Talk. And his presentation was focused on more of a business model and looking at companies, looking at innovations and how to engage in an innovation and then share it with others. So looking at this from our perspective of an innovation of UDL. I'll go over that first, and then I'll just give you a quick understanding of what it looked like in Simon Sinek. So we looked at our practitioner beliefs around UDL. So that really supports the why, the purpose. Why are we engaging in this work on UDL? So what is your cause? So that really goes in with what we went over with our practitioner beliefs, looking at variability and some of the other components. What do you believe? So starting to look at, those core beliefs for UDL, and then matching those personally. Why do you want to support UDL within your team, within your school? And, personally, how do those beliefs translate into your own personal beliefs and your efforts to support UDL? How, the process. So those are specific actions taken to realize your why. So that is part of what we're going to be doing this year with UDL is, putting in some actions. How can we support UDL in our school and be true to some of those beliefs that we talked about earlier? And the result is, and I think with a lot of initiatives and supports that we provide within our schools and, some of the changes that we look into, we're looking at what are the results. Did we meet our goal, our beliefs? And what is the result of the why? So did we, meet our goal and support, for this series, supporting UDL in our school? And how do we know that we support those three different practitioner beliefs? Okay, so once again, kind of going into the fact that UDL is a framework, we're going to be looking at the engagement guidelines. Okay, and so we're going to be looking at the three pieces to the engagement guidelines: providing options for recruiting interest, sustaining effort and persistence, and I love these graphics, and self-regulation. So the three guidelines for engagement are to provide options for recruiting interest, to provide options for sustaining effort and persistence, and provide options for self-regulation. So when many people think about engagement, they really just focus on that first part, getting students engaged, getting that hook, getting student interest. But we know that's just the first step in engagement. And usually it's one where like folks kind of, well, I presented something that really engaged the students, but there's the other two pieces to engagement that are also very important. And so we're going to, take a look at each one of these. So looking at, recruiting interest, our first piece is to optimize individual choice. So in our scenario and just some of the feedback from the group, there was a lot of discussion about, providing choice and, providing students the information or learners information or participants in our activities information so that they can have individual choice, which also includes providing options, which also engage the students. So we've discussed just really the opportunities for choice, but also to optimize reliance, value, and authenticity. So when we're looking at recruiting interest, we're giving choices, but we also want to engage those students. What about the activity that we're providing or the instruction we're providing is relevant to those students? And in one of our breakout rooms, we kind of talked a little bit about students kind of seeing their future. How does this learning or this activity or this lesson relate to their life currently, and then also what they might value or want to support in the future? Minimizing threats and distractions. And that can kind of look like it can be within the environment, kind of making an environment that's suitable for folks to and students to feel comfortable. It could be the socialization, the communication within the classroom and during instruction that provides focus and provides students within that classroom, all students, the opportunity to feel comfortable. And so these are some things that teachers and instructors can kind of support. They can also rely on students to support. So we're looking at things like norms, establishing norms and expectations within the classroom that are clearly communicated, that students are provided with support and scaffolding to meet those norms, and then also to kind of have some plans in place if students have some difficulties with that. Also, too, we want to make sure that students within our classrooms and instruction know that they're supported by their instructor and that they have their backs. So just giving you the opportunity to take a few minutes to take a look at what does this actually look like within the classroom. So just giving you some additional examples. Optimizing choice. So you can see within that section, we're looking at, as I mentioned before, not just the physical, but just the makeup or the construction of how the students are learning. So are we looking at providing some opportunities for group work, partners, and just supporting the choice with materials and content? So we're optimizing choice in various different ways. Also, too, as far as materials and how students are receiving information or generating information. So having choice with text, video, materials. And we modeled that with the options within our Padlet. So just giving students a lot of opportunity and kind of going back to our lasagna dinner, looking at a lot of different options for folks so that all students can be engaged. Optimize relevance. And looking at from the transition lens and looking at students always building their knowledge for perhaps the next course that they're working on, or looking at it from the perspective of preparing for their future, or so that they can be more successful at any age in their lives. Make sure content is culturally relevant, and just looking at culture from many different angles. Is it community culture? Is it ethnicity? Is it looking at also age? Something that I didn't think of until, reading some of the UDL information as far as culturally relevant, looking at ages of students and how different materials are accessed and utilized in different age groups. Talking with my daughter, who's a high school student, she'll often say, well, the freshmen are more Instagram, but the seniors are more TikTok. So we just really communicate in that way. So kind of looking at that, like, do we really need to know all that information? Well, it is. It's culturally relevant. Students in middle school carry their books in their hands. When you go to high school, do not be caught carrying your books in your hands. You put them in your backpack. So just various different little things that I think we notice day to day, but never really think of it as culture. But, just really being very in tune with and knowing aspects of student culture. Very activities help students find personal connection. So like really giving students the opportunity, and something also that you'll find in the UDL literature is really working towards students kind of developing their own choices, and we saw that a lot in the chat, student directed, student focused, really setting things up so it's not, well, you can have a choice of these 3 different novels, we'll probably kind of connect with one of them. Giving students the opportunity to choose from their materials, and there may be, some, support and reinforcement, like having that discussion where, why did you select this, and getting some, reflection on that also. It does take time, but it's definitely worth it to have those engaged students. And then we have really clear-cut, minimize threats and distractions. And you can see, just some of the examples there. And one of the pieces that we really want to look at is focus on growth mindset, and just really, just the importance of the atmosphere, encouraging risk-taking and challenging oneself, and making sure that there is effective feedback so that students just, aren't, just struggling in those situations, but then also have some supports. And one of the things which encourages risk-taking and challenging oneself is, just talking with students about like, well, what are some of the strategies that, when you have some difficulties, let's kind of brainstorm as a group of some opportunities or options that we can take to alleviate that. So just really the focus of UDL, folks really put in the chat, student directed. And that's, in each one of these, you can see there's a lot of room for providing that opportunity for students. So going into growth mindset. And so just to give you a little information about growth mindset, and something that, I've really found to be really valuable. So growth mindset is actually just the brainchild of Carol Dweck. And she's a researcher from Stanford University. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I've read it a million times, but really have never said it. And it's the opposite of fixed mindset. Growth mindset basically means to believe that the ability isn't necessarily inherited, and that with lots of practice and support, we can get better at things. So just a really big example, some folks utilize an analogy of starting a new sport, and that we find that most folks kind of if you're starting to play soccer or baseball, that you won't probably just go in and be great at it initially, but some folks don't always kind of translate that into more academic activities. And you will find, and I hear it all the time, that folks, and I used to be one of those people that said this, well, I'm not really great at math, so you probably don't want to have me fill in the blank. But actually found out through some professional development and joining with Patton that, given the strategies, the supports, the understanding, and also too, working with peers, that I today feel very confident and would never feel that I could say I'm not very good at math anymore. So it's just looking at that, believe in oneself, and the power of yet. So instead of saying I'm not good at something, I'm not good at it yet, that it is a progression and something that kind of continues over time. Okay, so just giving some opportunities. We talked about choice, and just give you just a, I think this is in our resources, just a very quick example of choice boards. And I recently saw a video where students were sharing with the videographers about how they use their choice boards within their class. So here's just an example that we're providing you as a resource, and giving opportunities for students selecting activities through a choice board, a very simple activity here. Okay, so moving on to sustaining effort and persistence. So you have like the very nice graphic there. So this is a big one, because once you have interest, how do you keep the students interested? So just gaining interest is the first part, and how do we maintain it? Encouraging them to embrace growth mindset is part of it. So that's kind of why we just went over that, both because it minimizes the threat of failure and it allows students to set appropriate expectations for themselves. So, just, baby steps or small pieces at a time for some folks. Encouraging them to embrace it, and it, will really, help them, set their expectations. But we also need to help students sustain effort and persistence by heightening, the goals and objectives and varying demands and resources to optimize challenge. And so we're looking at fostering collaboration and community, and that will help increase mastery-oriented feedback, from the instructor. So those are some of the things that, can help in sustaining efforts. So teacher, instructor supports are really key into providing that continuous, feedback and encouragement and support for some students. And also too, it helps with students being involved and being part of that goal setting. So kind of looking at, utilizing your, providing support and feedback, but also to having the student kind of set their goals and pace with your support, and that will kind of increase and sustain persistent effort. So what does that look like? So we kind of went over like a kind of guidelines for that, but what does it look like? So I'll just give you a minute to kind of look over just 3 different ideas of what this would look like as far as, in the classroom. Okay, so just going to encourage you just very quickly, just pop into the chat any additional ideas as far as these 3 categories or options, just any ideas that you have that go beyond, what we have here on the slide. And I like in this one that I have seen a few times, formative assessment, great. In the foster collaboration class-generated rubric. And I have seen that in a few classes, but I think that's, a really interesting part. Even, students kind of going over a predetermined rubric and, kind of making some changes, maybe putting in their own words. Oh yeah, that is interesting. Student generated rubrics, sometimes that they can be a little bit hard on themselves. And, just kind of developing something like that. Once again, that brings in that teacher, feedback, and just, not just turning the task over to the student, but like having the student lead it, but then giving that feedback. So that's great input. not one and done philosophy. So, kind of looking at learning as a progression. Great. Okay, going to continue. Okay. And here's something that we included in here, and something that is kind of continuing to kind of support that determination, resilience, and motivation, grit. And grit's a concept developed by Angela Duckworth, who wrote a book with the same title. And it's the feeling of determination, resilience, and motivation, and highly linked to sustaining effort and persistence. And it is a term that a lot of teachers are utilizing and supporting their students with hope, with the hope that students will, and that support certainly, that students will be determined, resilient, and motivated. If you think about the UDL guidelines for engagement, and in particular the checkpoints on sustaining effort and persistence, they really help develop that grit in students. So UDL is an avenue to just really supporting what grit really stands for and how it can support students. Here is a tool, and once again, we're kind of putting some resources in some of the places. So there's some quick things that you can kind of check out. And this is engagement resource roundup, and we had a couple within this presentation. Goals for productive discussion and 9 talk moves. So, just supporting some students within productive discussions. These could be small groups, whole class, pairs, but kind of looking at these various different goals. And some of the teachers that we're working with in the Word Generation Initiative, they are having, some debate and discussions as part of their learning. And they have this resource. And so when they're working on discussions with students, so that all students can participate in the discussions, they will pick a goal or goals for their discussion, and they will instruct, practice, and share some of these activities to enrich and make productive discussions more meaningful for students, and kind of turn over to more student directed. So they provide these 9 talk moves so that the discussion is richer, because students have the opportunity to kind of practice these skills in the discussion. So students are more on having the opportunity to kind of participate and share and contribute. So here you have goal 1, help individual students share, expand, and clarify their own thinking. So teachers will sometimes do like a little bit of an informal assessment and decide on a goal that they want to work on. And goal number 1, time to talk. So partner talk, writing and think time, wait time, say more. Can you say more about that? So these are some moves that the students will demonstrate during discussions, and they're obviously taught, practiced, and shared with students so that they can utilize these within discussions. So this is a great little organization tool to support that. And also, you may find, like within your classes, you're finding that students really do some of these moves, but not all the students are able to because they haven't learned them, or the environment isn't conducive to that. So these give you an opportunity to kind of do some self-assessment and then develop, where you want to kind of provide some instruction. So it's a nice little guide. Okay, so another piece that we want to look at in our third engagement, self-regulation. So this is the third part, and set goals for class. Really is a great piece to this. How long do you think we can write in our journals today? So kind of self-regulation. So giving students, kind of turning it over to students and saying, let's set some goals today. And how long do you think we can write in our journals today? So students will kind of think about, well, I think we can, do 5 minutes. Well, let's, maybe we can kind of increase it. How can we build that? And how long can you stick with this as it starts to get hard? So it's just kind of opening up for that discussion and finding out where students are. And just really helping them to self-regulate, teach and model coping skills. So quite a bit is kind of involved in self-regulation. So building stamina also too is one thing, kind of looking at, how much we can write today. Let's kind of continue to increase that. And how would we increase it? So having those discussions, teach modeling coping skills, and develop self-assessment and reflection. So a lot of times, following lessons, and some folks may find, and I think we kind of saw it a little bit in the chat, develop self-assessment. They might be either maybe not gauged in a way that's productive for them as far as self-assessment, and that's where we provide that support, the feedback, and just really, kind of assisting and guiding them. Also, too, reflection, a really big piece, and I find that also too sometimes when that's included in a training that I go to, it gives me that opportunity, because I've been receiving all this information, to kind of think about, what did I learn today? What more do I need to know? How can I utilize some of this information? Maybe I need some more information. Maybe I felt, that I needed more to kind of learn, or perhaps I did not pretty much focus on something that I probably needed to do. So it can be, positive pieces. It can be things that kind of continue your learning. So it's a really good piece. A lot of folks, during a lesson, they kind of run out of time. And quite a few of our guests in some of our conferences have really kind of stressed the fact that reflection really is so important to always make sure that you spend some time. I was in a class recently where students were given a choice of different ways they could solve a problem. And then at the end, they had an opportunity to share with their group or to share with the whole class if they chose to, why they selected that method and what they thought about it and were they successful. And so it was really interesting to hear from each student and for them to hear each other. And then also too, the teacher was gathering information on how students were affected or participated or were motivated by the activity that he had set up. So good stuff all around. Big formative assessment piece. Okay, and here's a few more pieces on what self-regulation can look like. You can see, there's scaffolding opportunities, helping students identify how the frustrations affect their learning. Also, a very big piece too to think about. Generate troubleshooting strategies as a group. And I think that's a really good piece too, because that really kind of helps the students get engaged. Also, it just really helps them to kind of share some of their culture and also too some of their individual ideas, and students can kind of learn from each other. Well, I utilize this strategy. And I think as adults, sometimes we have the opportunity too, when we're struggling, and hopefully have the opportunity to like network with a colleague and kind of get through that, maybe by adopting some of their strategies or learning new strategies or new strategies to try. So, and that's nice to kind of, as a class, to kind of record some of those strategies and have those available for students. Develop self-assessment reflection. And those are just, giving students, structured opportunities to, reflect and respond to their learning. And then also too on the feedback that we give them. Engagement resource roundup again. This is self-assessment. And this is, just another opportunity. We have this in the resources to check out self-created goals and just kind of charting some of that information. So kind of really focusing on social and emotional development. Okay, so the engagement principle, and just kind of look at, just different ways. And I think I really like this graphic because it pulls all that information or kind of summarizes some of the information that we just took a look at. So looking at, you're seeing the UDL guideline. And as much as, we can kind of remember each one of those, we kind of can attach with that the translation for it. So what specifically does that guideline entail? And it's kind of like, this is a really nice guide to kind of share, to kind of keep as far as, remembering and, keeping us engaged in the engagement principle, but also too, it's a nice resource to kind of share with others. And so you can kind of see too, provide options for sustaining effort and persistence. You can kind of see the translation, and it just really notes, the growth mindset, offering scaffolds, and then also to building collaborative grouping. Students can help each other. So it's really kind of like, it just kind of encompasses what supports we're providing, but really kind of moving towards that student-centered, student focus, which is kind of like a really nice piece to it. Also to another piece, and I know that a lot of teachers are, really looking at providing options for self-regulation. Very, respectful, student-focused feedback, giving students the opportunity to, regulate themselves, like some tools that are provided for them that can kind of be discrete, or also to some folks are doing, I think some folks kind of mentioned like tier 1, but like all students are kind of working through some breathing exercises, some transitioning activities to kind of help students go from one activity to another. And this is something that's instructed and worked through with the whole group. And I know quite a few folks were utilizing these virtually over the last couple of months too, to kind of, keep their students engaged and just really kind of relaxed and focused on learning. Okay, so we have an opportunity for a breakout alert, and we're going to give you quite the opportunity to share your aha moments about engagement and how it connects with your work, and what will you try. So quite a little bit here, kind of reflecting on what we've done, giving you an opportunity for reflection here. So
Elaine, I'll go ahead and open up those breakout rooms for you, Elaine. And participants, you'll have 10 minutes. This will be team specific, so you will be in a breakout room with others from your school or district. And again, talking about some of your takeaways and aha moments about that principle of an engagement. And specifically, what might you try back in your classrooms, in your buildings, to help recruit interest, to help sustain effort, and to provide options for self-regulation with your students. If I'm going to open the rooms now. If you're not assigned, please just stay where you are, and we will move you to the room that you need to be in. Right, I think we are all back from our breakout rooms. I see a question in the chat box, will we get more time with our teams? And the answer is absolutely yes, but that will come in the form of our next activity, which is a site visit that we will schedule with each site. Elaine or Amy, could you take us to the next slide?
Yes. Yes, they can.
All right, so just as a heads up of where we're headed in the future, our next training date, our next deep dive will be into the deep dive of representation, and that will be occurring on December 8th. So make sure that you have registered for all of those sessions. When you have registered for the deep dive series, you received multiple links, and those are pre-registration codes. So you want to make sure that you click on those codes to register for each individual session. In the meantime, we will be contacting you. Your patent point of contact will be getting a hold of your grant coordinator here in the coming days to set up your initial site visit. That will be a virtual site visit, and it'll be an opportunity for us to reflect on this principle of engagement and how we want to start looking at how engagement strategies can support your UDL goals and visions. And if you could go to the next slide, you may have questions as we move forward. Of course, you each have a patent point of contact working with your specific site. You also have regional contacts in the Western office. That is myself, Jeff Matheson. In the Central office, Tara Russo. And in the Eastern region, Dr. Lisa Russo. And again, please feel free to communicate to those regional contacts or your patent point of contact working directly with your site. We do ask that before you sign off today, that you can complete the session verification form. You can find the link to that form in the chat box right now. Thank you, Kim, for posting that. Or you can grab the code through the QR code on the screen, and that'll take you to the session verification form. We would like every participant to complete this form, and that includes those who could not be with us today. So grant coordinators and team members, please remind your colleagues who could not be with us today that we would like them to watch the recording and also complete the session verification form. You should try to do that, especially those members who were not with us today. You should try to view that recording prior to your scheduled site visit. That way we can have collective conversation around the principle of engagement and those strategies that might support your goals and visions for UDL. Again, your patent point of contact will be reaching out to you in the next couple of days to set up those site visits. We would like to have those site visits complete in the month of December. And Elaine, I want to have you go back one slide, or Amy, because I feel like
Jeff, I just put in the chat, there's an error with the date, so don't go back to that slide.
Okay, great. That's what I was just, as I was thinking out loud, I felt like that was not the right date. No, the next training date is indeed January 12th. So I apologize for the confusion. Our next training date is January 12th. We would like those site visits to be set up sometime between now and that January 12th deep dive into representation. And Scott, yes, the recording will be posted to the Padlet, so you can simply click within the Padlet to access that recording. And when we reach out to grant coordinators, we will provide the Padlet link again, as well as a link to the recording, just to make sure that everything is clearly communicated. So on behalf of Elaine and Amy and our patent team, I just want to again thank you all for being with us today. We look forward to continuing this work in your individual sites during our first site visits. Yes, the link to the recording, will the link to the recording include the PowerPoint? That PowerPoint is already on the Padlet, and we will add the link to the recording to the Padlet as soon as it is processed and available. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.